Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von Beek. A few months ago, I made a video about the political commentator Briahna Joy Gray. She's someone who I really like as a commentator, but I had some mild criticisms of a video she made suggesting that the Beatles were overrated as a band. The TLDR of my argument is if you believe the Beatles are overrated, compare them to their peers, listen to the other rock bands of the British invasion, like even the Rolling Stones, and you'll realize very quickly those albums get kind of repetitive, whereas the Beatles albums were, filled with creativity and unique personality. So in that sense, I disagreed with Briahna Joy Gray. She did make a point, however, in her video that different people can have a distorted sense of who counts as famous because in different communities, there are slightly different canons. And while there are, obviously a lot of African-American musicians who count as huge American and international superstars, Stevie Wonders, Princes, Aretha Franklins, Michael Jacksons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Briahna Joy Gray did have the kind of sense that there was a difference perhaps between white America and Black America in terms of exactly who was upheld, who was so famous. And a name she dropped as someone who was huge to her, who for me was more just a name, was Luther Vandross. So that made me curious. Had I been missing out on this guy over the years? I finally found an album of Luther Vandross's. It's called I Know. And I'm not sure if this was going to give me the best possible Luther Vandross experience. I looked up how it's perceived in advance. And on the one hand, it does seem to get good reviews. On the other hand, it's not upheld as a particularly an interesting or an important album. On top of that, this is an album released in 1998, fairly deep into his career. This is a guy who was around in the 1970s. So my previous knowledge of him was hearing him singing, I think, The Lady is Tramp on a Frank Sinatra duets album, and knowing that he worked with David Bowie on the Young Americans album. So clearly by 1998, he's a veteran of the music scene, and this album isn't necessarily the most interesting thing he put out. However, it is the CD I was able to come across. So Toronto Public Library, maybe add some more Luther Vandross to your collection. So I'll just briefly talk about the tracks on here because while they're maybe not the best in the world, they're certainly very pleasant to listen to. And, I had some interesting kind of rambly thoughts. So the first two tracks on here are Keeping My Faith in You and Isn't There Someone? And when I first heard these, I thought, okay, these are very smooth and beautiful sounding songs. And you can certainly hear the talent in Luther Vandross's voice, particularly on track 2, Isn't There Someone, where I believe there was a nice vocal modulation. So track 1 is interesting, and it does that thing where at first it sounds like it's a love song, but if you actually look at the lyrics, he's singing very affectionately about a close friend. And there's something nice to that idea, the sort of tenderness of opening up, telling someone, even if they're not your partner, how much you love them. It's a very nice idea. I think it's also the idea underlying Queen's song, You're My Best Friend. At the same time, by making it ambiguous whether you're singing about a friend or a lover, you kind of miss out on the chance of actually getting into the specificity of what can make a friendship relationship so special. With love songs, you don't always have to be specific because love is kind of rooted in attraction, this sort of magnetism thing you can't put into words, whereas friendships are more likely to be rooted on specific bonds. So maybe there's an even better version of this song out there that's not just I love you, you're special, I believe in you, but, actually has some real anecdotes about the friendship in it. I don't know. Track 3 was an interesting one. It's called Religion. And I kind of went back and forth on the meaning of this one. I think it's a pro-religion song, but sort of in a way that plays it safe with outsiders because the chorus goes, religion, that's my decision. I guess it's kind of playing it safe with non-religious people and people who have different religions than I assume Vandross would have by saying, it's his decision. It's a personal thing. He's not imposing it on anyone. At the same time, there's also a kind of social conservative undertone in the song. There's a verse about a girl, so I imagine a teenager being pregnant, and the song goes, you should have smartened up. You should have found your religion. At the same time, I did find this clip of Luther being interviewed by Oprah, where she asked him if he sang in church growing up, and he said he could never do that kind of thing because the idea of ritualistically expressing religion every Sunday and singing with this holy voice felt kind of phony to him. So It's possible that the religion he's talking about in this song is not institutional religion, and despite the weird line about the pregnancy, it's not judgmental conservative religion. He's talking about it as a more abstract, common sense, higher purpose thing that's in the air. So it's hard to tell what's going on with this song. I think musically, the appeal of it is just the way the word religion sounds when emphasized in a chorus. It kind of feels like a parallel to Stevie Wonder singing a song centered around the word superstition. Track number 4 is called Get It Right. This is an experimentation with having a guest rapper in. Her name is Marcella Precise. It was fine to listen to. I feel like it was doing a kind of tongue-in-cheek thing where Luther Vandross counts as this, too clean a guy to have rap on a song, even though it's perfectly family-friendly rap we have coming here. It was nice to listen to. I felt like Marcella Precise kind of stole the show with the clever rap lyrics, and Luther's background vocals here kind of forgettable. Track number 5 is the title song. It's called I Know. I have to admit, this one has grown on me a bit since I wrote my notes on it. And one thing that's always appealing about it, I mentioned Stevie Wonder earlier. Stevie Wonder plays the harmonica on it, and Stevie Wonder's harmonica is always beautiful. The one thing I was thinking on this song, and one could say about the whole album, is the way that the sort of synthesizer sounds of the 80s and 90s didn't age well. Like certain synthesizers just sound inherently cheesy. And I'm not against cheesy music. I certainly love orchestral cheesy music with trumpets and strings from the 70s. But there's just something about this moment of synthesizer music that doesn't quite play over well. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it has to do with it being used in a lot of parodies of itself, or maybe it's just because we think of synthesizers as programmed, as perfectly calculated. So when we hear synthesizers with a sentimental song, we don't hear genuine sentimental cheesiness, we hear calculated cheesiness, whether that's a fair criticism of the songwriter's intent or not. Lyric-wise, this was a song about romantic jealousy. And as I feel when I hear a lot of love songs, I wonder whether this is something that a lot of people genuinely feel, or it's kind of a musical cliche. I've always taken the approach, if you're, in a relationship with someone, that kind of means you trust them unless you have very specific issues. So it was hard to tell if this song was just writing in cliches or talking about a more specific feeling. Track 7, probably the best song on the album. It's called Nights in Harlem, a celebration of the Harlem music tradition. It was just a sort of perfectly produced song. There's this vocal harmonization that hits right on the emphatic piece in the chorus. Track number 8 is called Dream Lover, and it's ambiguous if it's actually about imagining someone, like a more truly psychedelic song, or it's just being in a happy relationship and hoping that relationship is not a dream. Given the overall tone of this album, one has to think it's the latter. So I actually think that Luther Vandross has done a very good job so far of managing to make every song sound just a little bit different, even though he's working with largely the same instrumentation. And I don't know if he's using a different synth here, or it's just this song is based more on chords rather than individual twinkly notes. But that part of things is well done. However, given the overall quality of the production on this album, it just makes one wonder, why couldn't the lyrics also have been a bit more distinct, a bit more differentiated? I mean, hearing this song, this clearly could have been a mysterious psychedelic song, and it just would have taken the album to the next level if the lyrics were just a bit weirder. Track number 9 is called When I Need You, and it was kind of funny because I was thinking earlier about, my relationship to 80s and 90s cheesy sounds with synths versus earlier cheesing sounds with horns and strings. And on this song, he brings in those horns and strings, and I thought it worked really well. I also like the pacing of the song a bit better. The lyrics were sung in a more slowed down way that just made them sound a bit more meaningful. Now, that said, maybe the reason I like this song better is, again, I really like 60s and 70s music, and it turned out this was a cover of a 70s song, I think performed originally by Albert Hammond and then by Leo Sayer, and it was written by the iconic 70s songwriters Albert Hammond and Carol Bayer Sager. Track number 10 is called Are You Using Me? And as I've been saying, he manages to make every song sound just a bit different, even as it's largely the same. And the anger in that title, I feel like just gave the song a bit more of a punch. Track number 11 is called Are You Mad at Me? A very simple question, but I feel like a great thing to do in songwriting is just sometimes to state emotion that's so simple, sounds so childlike when it's expressed, and just be bold enough to say it so we have something to relate to. You know, the feeling of feeling small and helpless, of being irrationally afraid of someone's anger. This came out so nicely in the song. An unrelated song I had this feeling about is the pop song from a couple years ago. I think it's called Why Do You Have to Be So Rude or something like that. You know, I grow up in a city where, despite the stereotype about Canadians being very polite, people are often very rude to you here. Like if you accidentally bumped into them and they say, and you say sorry rather than saying no worries or excuse me too, people will be like, you should be sorry. Anyway, that was a tangent. But the point is, I like nice, raw, simple, innocent emotions. And in writing this song, "Are You Mad at Me?" Luther did a good job of expressing that. Track number 12, nice place to conclude the album, is called Now That I Have You. It was a song that made me wonder a bit about its intentions because he opens up it with having no more tears. So it sounds more like someone who's having an unhappy ending but is coming to deal with it. But then it kind of backs away from that by saying, no, I have a happy ending. I have you. I don't know. It felt like there was some dual intent to it. But, you know, a nicely produced song, nice way to end the album, except then the album technically ends with a remix of Nights in Harlem. So overall, my first experience listening to Luther Vandross was pretty much, I like pretty much all these songs, but they also all sound kind of similar. So I'll keep my eyes out for more classic Luther Vandross stuff, presumably like the stuff from the beginning of the 80s when he was really just starting as a solo artist. But this was an interesting introduction, and I think some of these songs are going to stay in my head for a while. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.